I see this topic of Guruji, Paramahamsa Vishwananda being God as walking on a knife edge. I remember my builder, he's a Bosnian guy, he did a lot of building work for me. He just randomly came for darshan. He's a Muslim. And he just came up to me after darshan and he was just like, I don't know who this guy is, but I know he's not human.
And he looks at me and he just blinks. From that moment, I lose memory of every experience I've ever had with him. I don't know the room I'm sitting in, I don't know who he is, and I don't understand why I'm dressed the way I am.
Why do you need to leverage Guruji's form with another form of God? Guruji is his own divinity. He's doing his own leela. He's his own personality.
I had seen him perform miracles. I had seen him materialize things, hear prayer, these things for those 8 years leading up to that. Again, incredible things I had seen. But this one touched me in a different way. Jai Gurudev, Mayuran.
Jai Gurudev.
Welcome back to the podcast. First repeat guest that we have on the podcast.
I'm honored. Thank you.
We didn't ruffle enough feathers with the first episode, so here we are to do it again.
Right.
So the topic we want to discuss today is, it centers around the idea that sometimes Guruji is presented as being God himself. Paramahamsa Vishwananda is presented as being a direct incarnation of God, or manifestation, however you want to phrase it. And it is a topic that I believe it to be very important. I believe it's a topic that we, in our position as educators in Bhakti Marga, in the mission, people responsible for the dissemination of his teachings and the philosophy and the siddhanta of our sampradaya and our movement, have to contend with all the time, because we have to contend not only with the concept and the reasons for it or not, but also how people understand it, how people then pass that message on, how they communicate it, how they conceive of it internally and externally. And I think, therefore, there are two purposes to what we would like to achieve today in this conversation. One is, we want to contextualize the claim, qualify the claim that Guruji is God into a more grounded understanding of what we mean by that and what we would hope people understand by that. So not only grounding the claim itself, but grounding the claimants, the people who make these claims, to understand how, when, why to make such claims. And the second purpose that I would like to sort of add on to that is to view other similar claims in light of the framework that we're going to build for the Guruji claim. Because I think in the religious landscape, in the spiritual landscape, especially in Sanatana Dharma, where everybody believes their guru is God to some extent, we need to have a more grounded, again, approach to dissecting those claims, to understanding where those claims come from and how we should see those claims. Because I think from the Abrahamic perspective, a claim of Godhead, or someone being God in the case of Jesus, is far less common. It's a more rare thing. It's a singular person in this case who is being, of which that claim is being made of. And I think that it therefore holds a lot more weight, whereas in Hinduism there are so many that have made the claim, continue to make the claim, that I think it not that it dilutes it, but again, I think it needs to be viewed through a different lens. And so I would like to put some of those other claims through those filters, including even on the Abrahamic side of the lens as well. But we'll get to that a little bit later. I think first and most importantly, it's about understanding where that claim comes from, why we do it, and what we mean by it when we say Guruji is God. So just before we kick that off, Mayuran, so why do you think this topic is important right now?
Because for us as devotees, this is what I would class as the Rajaguhya, the royal secret, the secret of all secrets, the most confidential thing, a concept, because I describe this as a kind of nuclear bomb, right? A nuclear bomb that could destroy Maya and destroy ignorance, but a nuclear bomb, if you get it wrong, could destroy yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And so I see this topic of Guruji, Paramahamsa Vishwananda being God as walking on a knife edge. And it requires immense grounding, right? It means that we have to be extremely rational, sincere, and not allowing ourselves to just rocket off into fantasy. And I think that is the key point to understand. If we can understand this concept in a really grounded way, I think it could unlock the key to everything, to be honest, on our path.
Okay, we're in agreement. So let's break down that claim then into, let's say, as you said, rational segments. And so first and foremost, I think to get to the heights of Guruji being God, we've got to start with why we believe he's not an ordinary being to begin with. So do you want to map that out a little bit?
So I'll just give you one small experience, right? Years ago, I had an auntie. She lived in India. She had a guru. Her guru passed away. She was very close to her guru. She prayed to God, why have you abandoned me, right? I'm lost in this world. I hadn't seen her for 10 years, right? She suddenly, without us knowing, came to London where I am, and she didn't have our number. She didn't know where we lived. She remembered where we lived from 10 years ago. She wasn't even sure if we still lived there. She randomly turns up on a certain morning. And it just so happens that Guruji, Paramahamsa Vishwananda, had come to our house after 5-6 years. He hadn't come before. He did an abhishek in our house because we could have a deity of Narasimhadev there, Lakshmi Narasimhadev. And he randomly decided to stay one extra night. So after 5 years of not coming to our house, he came to our house to do abhishekam and then spontaneously decided to stay one extra night. And it just so happened that morning, my auntie, who had never come to our house, who had forgotten our phone number, who had just lost her guru, who had been praying intensely to God that I've been abandoned, I need to know that you still love me, knocked on our window on that very morning. I opened the door and was like shocked to see her after 10 years. And she was so delighted that we were still living in this house. And she said, I just wanted to see you. I just had a feeling that I wanted to see you this morning. And then suddenly, as she comes into our house, who comes down the stairs? Paramahamsa Vishwananda. She sees Paramahamsa Vishwananda, bursts out crying. And just because she knows, she just feels something, she sees something, there's connections there. Guruji then takes her into a room, speaks to her at length for an hour, and then she comes out crying, saying to me, I know God has not forgotten me. That's just one small experience. Mm-hmm. One small experience of coincidences, random events, someone appealing to God, sending out a radio signal to God, and who picks it up? Paramahamsa Vishwananda picks it up, right? And randomly that happens. Coincidentally, that happens. That meeting happens and that connection is formed. Now, we could go on and on and on and on about these experiences. How I've been praying in my room in London and then suddenly he phones me and then says to me, I know what you've been praying about. Like my brother, that's happened a couple of times. You've had umpteen miracles. We can go back to Guruji from a child in Mauritius. Manifestations, healings, his omniscience, he's beyond time and space, master of consciousness. At the very least, we have to walk away from the situation and say, Paramahamsa Vishwananda, I don't know who he is, but he's a phenomena. Right?
Not ordinary.
He's not ordinary. He's not human. I remember my builder, he's a Bosnian guy who did a lot of building work for me. He just randomly came for darshan. He's a Muslim. And he just came up to me after darshan and he was just like, I don't know who this guy is, but I know he's not human. Right? I don't know who this guy is, but when I look at him, I know he's not human. So you can say he's a yogi. You can say he's a mystic. You can say he's a saint or a pure devotee. But I think it's going to be very difficult to conclude that Paramahamsa Vishwananda is an ordinary person.
Yeah, and I think back to the point, we are building a case for this. And so part of building that case is gradually, step by step, creating the possibility of him being what we claim him to be, and that also to explain why we are willing to view him in that way. Because obviously everything you've just shared, and I know the many other stories that could be shared as well, and I have many, I'll share one in a second. But I know that anybody who listens to this can take the opinion of, yeah, but that doesn't mean he's God.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, look, Jesus walked on water, resurrected, did so many things allegedly as well, and you'll have endless numbers of people, Jews, Muslims, atheists of all kinds saying, yeah, but he's not God. I don't believe any of that stuff. So I'm not under any false, delusions here that anyone is going to sit here and accept these testimonies going, oh, God?
Yeah.
Without any shadow of a doubt, God. I know that. We're not trying to achieve that. So don't anyone listening to this, don't think that what you just shared is our expectation now that you would hear this and go, must
bow
be God.
down to him as a supreme Lord. No. It's simply to establish that this person is not ordinary. And that's the base point. The rest now, I mean, we haven't even gone into the idea of the transformation of the heart, right? the whole idea of purpose, the whole idea of meaning, all these kind of shifts in consciousness, whatever he's achieved in us as devotees. So that's a whole separate realm of experience as well. I've just got into kind of tangible, so-called kind of out of the norm, miraculous kind of incidences.
I'll give you one to supplement that a little bit, because what you just did is it shows the omniscience, it shows, the ability to respond to prayer and all of this, which I've experienced a lot. But one of the things that I experienced that really, again, propelled me towards that conception of who I believe him to be. So there was one time that I was with him, and I was feeling excessively proud and arrogant of my position, my relationship with him, my proximity to him, my status in the mission, in the movement. And I was quite obviously walking around with that arrogance. And so Guruji, in his wisdom and his tendency to address those things, he starts to poke me and provoke me in different ways, sort of normalizing me and bringing me down some levels. And I obviously reacted as any conditioned person would. I wasn't enjoying it. And I started to sort of push back, not in the sense of arguing with him, but pushing back in the sense of like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you saying these things about me or poking me in the way that you are? And then he finally came to a point where it hit a really sore spot. He started mentioning someone that had left him quite a while back, left Guruji, left the path, started speaking badly about the path, bad about Guruji. And this was many, many years ago. And he started saying how, despite everything that person has done, he loves him. Guruji loves him, would welcome him back with open arms if he were to come back. And I didn't have anything against that per se, but I had the feeling that in him saying that, he was saying that he loves him the same way he loves me.
Yeah.
And I've been loyal, and I've stayed, and I've been a servant, and all those things that I had in my self-conception, self-image. And so I questioned him on it. I pretty much said, paraphrasing, but along the lines of, but do you love him the same way you would love someone like me? And he looked at me as if I had just said the most ridiculous thing, and he says, yes, of course. And obviously, to a human conception of a relationship, or to an ordinary relationship, that makes no sense. If someone betrays you, speaks bad about you, leaves you, you haven't seen them for a decade plus, and you still love them the same way as someone who you have an intimate friendship with, someone that you have close connection with, doesn't make any sense. And so I reacted as a normal human would, and I really took it badly. And he just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And it came to a culmination, which was basically this. He calls me to his room. I'm with him, and he looks at me. He's made it clear at this point that he's upset at my arrogance. The arrogance to think that I should be loved more than another. The arrogance to think that I am worthy of something greater because of my conduct or because of my whatever it may be, and that someone else is not worthy of that love. So it's not only the arrogance that I'm great, it's also the arrogance that someone else shouldn't get what I get. It's really like a quite exalted thing when you think about it, too far. And he looks at me and he just blinks. And in blinking, I kid you not, from that moment, I lose memory of every experience I've ever had with him, because the experience goes from, in the middle of this heated argument with him, to suddenly I don't even recognize who he is.
So you basically sit there, you look at him, and you actually lose all samskara, all memory of who this person is. He's an absolute stranger to you.
I don't know the room I'm sitting in. I don't know who he is, and I don't understand why I'm dressed the way I am. Because I was with Tilak and
he does it with a blink of an eye.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there with Devotee and Kurta. And so I'm looking at myself, utterly confused as to why I'm dressed this way. I'm looking at the room, I don't recognize it. And I look at this man sitting in front of me, and I don't know who he is. And I feel uncomfortable because he's got paint on his forehead. I'm just sitting in someone's room. I'm literally like you awake from a dream, and you're just like, where the hell am I?
So the life you've lived over the last X number of years,
at that point, it was like 8 or 9 years that I was with him.
Yeah, and that's been obliterated in an instant.
Evaporated.
Yeah.
And I get up to walk away. I'm like, well, the easiest thing to do when you're in an uncomfortable situation is to remove yourself from the situation. So I just got up and aimed for the door. And he says to me, stop and come back. And again, don't ask me why, but I just feel compelled to do so. And I'm like, all right. And I just turn around and I'm back facing him. And he gives me a hug. Just reaches out and gives me a hug. And when he does that, everything comes flooding back. Just as clearly as it had gone, it all just starts coming back. And I break down into tears. And the reason I break down into tears is because the contrast was so great. Because the thing is, you live your day-to-day life, you don't know what you've become. You don't see the transformation over an 8-year span. You just gradually, day by day, change a little bit. And, for 8 years down the road, you've changed 100%, but you changed 1% per day. So you don't notice it as such. Yeah. And it all just came back in one go. And I just felt so overwhelmed, and I was crying because I could remember what it felt like to forget him and to not know any of this, to suddenly remembering everything that I'd lived for 8 years. And I said to him, please never do that to me again. And he says to me, I can't promise you that, because I can't guarantee that you won't ever become so arrogant and proud again.
Yeah.
And so then when things calmed down, I had a conversation with him about what happened. And he basically said to me, the only thing I did is that I removed what I gave you. And I essentially understood that he had given me the entirety of those 8 years with him. By his grace, by his doing, I had had the opportunity to live those 8 years with knowledge of him. And all he did was revert me back to the person I was before I met him. He just deleted that from my life.
Yeah.
Now, why I'm sharing this story is because I had seen him perform miracles. I had seen him materialize things, hear prayer, these things for those 8 years leading up to that. Again, incredible things I had seen. But this one touched me in a different way. This one affected me in a different way, because it was the first time I felt he's not, to me, a representative of God or a saintly person who is empowered by God to do certain things. The very, very distinct feeling I had in that day when all of this happened and the way it happened, this what I've just told you now doesn't do full justice to the experience. Obviously, we don't have the time and context now to go into every little detail. But it made me feel like I belonged to him. And I don't mean that in a sort of property or slave sort of concept, but more in the same way.
Or even in a very superficial way.
No, yeah. I mean it at the most fundamental level. Krishna says, chapter 15, verse 7 in the Gita, that every Atma is an amsha of him. It's a part of him. And I felt a part of him. I felt like he was playing with his fingers, he's just cracking his knuckles like a person would do to a part of their own body. He had such dominion over me, but again, not in a subjugating way, in a natural way, that he could just blink at me and 8 years of my life would be erased, and then he would hug me and it would just come back. And that for me felt like a different level. It's not games, it's not a little trinket that's materialized or this, that, and the other. It's such a deep connection of soul to soul, but him being up there and me being here, that it really changed the dynamics.
So the reason why we sometimes talk about miracles or whatever it is because if you're not a devotee, you need that kind of objective experience to say, hold on a minute, this is breaking the norm, this is miraculous in some way. If what these guys are saying are true, if it's true, then that proves that there's a phenomena going on. But really, what makes Guruji God for us is these experiences that you've just said, right? Because if you go to, say, Shastra or scripture, the concept of God is, yes, he's the original being, he's the source of everything, the creator of the universe, Satyam Jnanam Anandam Amalam Anandam, like the Upanishads say, these extraordinary statements of his existence, his consciousness, his bliss, his purity, his infinity. But to be honest with you, the universe as it is, sometimes we describe, like universe is pouring out of the skin pores of Mahavishnu, and one universe is billions of stars. And how can we understand God on that level, right? This is beyond the realm. Jagannatha, the supreme Lord of the universe. Are we saying Guruji is on that level? Okay, fine. To me, that's just beyond the realm of my experience. Why my heart tells me, and this is the way I put it always, why my heart tells me Guruji is God is because of experiences like you just described. We feel like there is nothing higher than him in our life. But we feel like our heart tells us he is the Lord of our life, the Lord of our soul, and your experience completely encapsulates that. I'll just tell you one other small experience. One time, Guruji asked us to go on a painting course, right? This is like back in 2007, right? So a few of us came there and Guruji wasn't going to turn up there. And so we're like, we come to see Guruji, but Guruji's not going to be there, but he got the Ardesh, got to go on this painting course. I'm like, me painting? It's not my thing really, but whatever. But we were painting saints, icons of saints. And so we spent 2 days just painting different saints. And then it was on the Sunday evening, Guruji just came back from France. He arrived late at night and he came in, he was like, so, how was your painting course? Let me see the paintings. And then he grouped all the paintings. There was about 7 paintings that each of us had done. And he began ordering the paintings in different orders. And it was so strange because he was ranking them. And some of the good ones he was putting last. And some of the really terrible ones he was putting first. And it made no sense. And then but it was clear that he was up to something. on another level, because nothing he was doing on a material level made sense. And then he picked up 2 paintings and he looked at these paintings and he was like, oh, poor fellow, because of the person he wrote, because it was a pretty bad painting. Like, I mean, the nose was everywhere, the skin was there. It was didn't look like a saint, looked more like a demon. But he picked up and he was like, oh, poor fellow. He goes, let me change the picture. And he looked at me and my brother, because we were the only ones in the room. He goes, bring me my paints, bring me my brush. And then he started changing the picture, licking the thing, putting the water, different colors. And suddenly this terrible picture of a saint, looks like a demon, became this wonderful picture of a saint. And he kept saying, look what I'm doing. And he was so excited. I'm changing the picture. I'm changing his picture. I'm changing his picture. And he did the same to another devotee. I'm changing her picture. Yes, yes. And he was so excited. And he looked and he was like, oh, it looks so beautiful now. And then the next thing he did was he almost ran downstairs, hugged the person whose picture he had just changed. And he said to him, I have changed your picture. I have changed your picture. And he kept saying that over and over again. And I watched as this devotee, over the next 5-6 years, Guruji micromanaged this devotee, both those devotees' lives, and completely set their path on a new trajectory, completely revolutionized their whole way they were going. They were in let's say, not a great place before, and they ended up becoming in a hugely, immensely great place afterwards, purely because of his micromanagement of their life. And it started with that painting. And when you have an experience like that, and I've had experiences like that, where he's literally dictating and orchestrating your whole life, you start to realize this is the Lord of my life. And just with a paintbrush, just by mere sankalpa, just by mere will, just by a blink of an eye in your case, he can literally transform your whole life, the whole trajectory of your soul. Right? Your soul has a contract with karma, but when you meet Guruji, he can wipe the slate clean just like that and set you on a whole new path. When that hits you in your life on a personal level, what are you supposed to say? Yeah. Oh, he's a mystic. Oh no, he's a pure devotee. He's just a saint. He's a guy. No, he's the Lord of my life, right? And he's the only person I want to serve. He's the highest thing in my life. That is the grounded way upon which I look at Guruji and I say, he is my Lord. He is my God. This is what my heart tells me. This is what experience tells me. And this is how I live my life. It's on that basis. The idea of him being the creator of the universe, yeah, philosophically, I'm open to it. The door is open to that. But what do you want me to say about that? I don't know about the universe. I don't know about universes coming out of Mahavishnu's skin pores, but I know what he's done to my life. I know there's nothing higher. And that's the way I approach him as God.
And I think it's the only way you can, because, look, at the end of the day, any God claim is a faith-based claim. You can provide me all the evidence you want. At the end of the day, there is still a faith element that, A, I believe in the evidence, and B, I interpret the evidence as pointing towards that fact that he is God. When you, when you put the claim on that scale, that creator of the universe is coming out of the skin pores of Mahavishnu, etc. Nobody can meet that claim at that level. Nobody can look at that and say, yeah, well, I have evidence to point towards that. I've seen him with the universe is coming out of his skin pores. It's nonsense. But neither has anyone seen that about any other. You see, this is the thing. You look at, and this is why I wanted to bring the other claims into the picture as well, because you'll see how non-different they are to some extent. Jesus, Krishna, even Krishna. I remember one conversation I had once with one devotee that was about this. He was basically saying, look, I know you guys think the Guruji's God. I've thought that at different times of my life, but I've come to the conclusion that I can't believe that any longer. And I said to him, why? And he says, well, Krishna's God. And when I compare the two, I just feel like Krishna comes out winning. And I'm like, well, that's a very strong argument there. And I said to him, but look, without playing devil's advocate, and obviously I believe Krishna's God, but this is not the point of the conversation I had with him. I just said to him, why do you believe Krishna's God? Justify the claim to me. And he said, well, look at the miracles that he did. I'm like, well, I can't. That's the first problem. I can't look at the miracles he did. Neither can you. How do you know he made them? He's like, well, it's in Shastra. Who wrote Shastra? He's like, what do you mean? Like, well, who wrote Shastra? He's like, Vedavyas. You met him? no. And he was just like, he had never thought about these things and never been challenged in that way. And again, I qualify this. I believe in Shastra. I believe that Vedavyas wrote it. I believe in all these things. But nonetheless, I'm asking the question because I'm trying to get to the root of belief, to the root of faith. What is it that instills that faith in you? And so as he was deconstructing his own apparent reasons for believing in it to get to the real reason why he believed in it, he was saying, Vedavyasa, the miracles, Guruji materializes a ring, Krishna lifted Govardhan. It's, you compare these two things, right? And after he had presented the Shastra arguments and all of these things and miracles, he basically sits to me and he says, because when I sit and do kirtan of Krishna's name, I feel something in my heart.
That's what it comes down to.
That's all he said.
Yeah.
And I said, and I respect your answer.
Yeah.
Because that I believe to be true. I don't doubt what you're saying. When you say you feel something when you sing his name, I believe you. Anyway, how could I disprove you? But I believe you. But when you tell me you believe he's God because someone wrote it somewhere and you don't know any of this, I'm not saying you don't believe it on a faith level, but it's not a compelling case, or it's certainly not a case for not believing in another claim, because the standards have to be the same.
Yeah. Look, when you read the stories of Krishna and the Bhagavatam especially, they are narrations specifically presented for you to enter into a love relationship with God. Mm-hmm. They are specifically designed, the poetry, the expression, the leelas, and the acharyas even extract out even more rasa and more juice from the stories, and they expand it even more. So you have a whole tradition specifically designed for your contemplation and meditation to enter into a whole leela, a whole set mindset where you can see Krishna as the Supreme Lord, as God. And so that's a wonderful technique. That is what the Bhakti traditions are about, and that's why they're so great. But let me tell you, to meet a personality who specifically challenges you, who specifically breaks the mold, who Guruji said, I have come here to challenge your mind. And I would do anything for that, he said. I would do anything for that. And even if you turn at him and says, you rebel against him or you resent him, he will take it because he's here to disturb you. He's not here to put you to sleep. He's here to disturb you. And if you can take that disturbance, if you can embrace his humanity, so-called limitation, and then with the embrace of that humanity and that apparent limitation, you can still penetrate that and see, that is God. That is divinity. That for me is a far greater realization than simply saying, Krishna's God because I read the Bhagavatam, right? If Guruji is invading and disturbing your micro-environment and he's basically saying to you, you can still smell the fragrance of his divinity, that speaks much greater of a mature realization, because it's much, much harder to do that than simply reading the narrations of Krishna and saying, wow, isn't this amazing?
Well, yeah, because it's a problem that has always persisted in every tradition, and that is when you have the abstract God that is able to be constructed by your imagination and mind because he's not actually walking and talking in front of you. So be it the God of scripture, or be it a God that someone has told you about.
Or a master that's even left the body.
Yeah. So if he's left the body, he's almost confined to books and testimony, right? So again, someone tells you about it or you read about it, whether it's a master, God, doesn't matter. You don't have to contend with that person. It's just a general observation and a fact of all situations in which these claims are made. You don't have to contend with it. And because of that, the process by which you develop faith in the individual is often divided into two options. One is the apologetics route, where you have logical, rational arguments presented to you, evidence-based. For example, look, Christianity for the longest time was growing not on evidence-based arguments, but rather on experiential arguments, faith-based arguments. Believe because I believe, and I'll tell you what he did in my life and what he's done for me, and you do the same. And the people sort of give it a chance, they feel something, they're on board. It wasn't that the earliest Christians were sitting there giving historical evidence of the resurrection, the empty tomb, all these sort of things.
Yeah.
That's a much more modern, let's say, phenomena that people present this, because understandably so, with the advent of science and technology and all these things, skepticism increases. The claim becomes less and less believable the more we understand about the world and nature, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have to change the goalposts. You have to say, well, look, fine, but then let me try to tackle this issue in another way. So let me present you with the evidence, right? Now, I may even accept the Christian claim for Jesus's divinity has more evidence, hard evidence, let's say, that could be presented, or historical evidence that can be presented, than the average claim about other people, right? Of years gone by. Krishna 5,000 years ago, Rama 10, 12,000 years ago plus, right? But one of the major points that has always baffled me is they go through such an effort to present these evidences to prove his divinity. But two things still baffle me. One is, even if he resurrected, even if there's an empty tomb and all these things, and he predicted it and he did it and whatever else, why does that mean God? Right? Yeah. Firstly, so by what standard what definition are you giving to the term God? And if you refer back to scripture, saying, well, scripture says the one who would resurrect is, God or whatever. Well, it's not that black and white, but still, that standard interests me. What is the threshold you have to cross that you're no longer just a divine personality or a saintly person, you are God?
Yeah.
One thing. And second is, and this is a point that even people like Sam Harris has made in debates with Christians in the past, for every miracle that you are saying there, he can point to someone like Satya Sai Baba, or he can point to people in India, for example, who have performed every one of those miracles or very similar miracles. And none of you are bothered in the slightest to examine the evidence for that over there. And so those are two different things that I want to look at, because firstly, the definition of God, we have definitions in Hindu Shastra for who God is as well. He's called Bhagavan, Bhaga, the one who possesses 6 bhagas, 6 let's say 6 qualities or 6 opulences. And then you look at the 6 qualities and you go, okay, he's has perfect knowledge, perfect wealth, strength. And you go, well, how am I supposed to measure this? How do you measure someone of absolute knowledge or absolute wealth or absolute strength? And then you think, well, it should exhibit it. That's how you measure it. It should be patently obvious to everyone. And yet that isn't the case. Because the same system that proposes this is the definition for God, then you have Krishna walking on earth, or Rama, or whoever else, not exhibiting all those qualities at all times. They exhibit them circumstantially. So in a certain moment, in front of a certain person, they may exhibit their true nature, quote unquote, to a point where you have to contend with that. As my experience, as your experience has done. My experience is something that no matter what logical arguments are presented to me, I still have to contend with the fact that he could blink and take away 8 years of my life.
Yeah.
And now you philosophically or logically or rationally explain how he's able to do that, and you can't. What you'll do is you'll make another faith-based claim. I think he's just a person with powers. You don't know what he is. You're just saying it because it's easier and more convenient for you to label him that way than to say, actually, that points to something perhaps beyond just a regular person. Because if you agree to that, and if you believe that, and this is the problem every listener will have to this episode, if they believe in my testimony, if they say, he's not lying, what happened really happened, what do you do with that? Because ignoring it is not really the most rational option. You have to contend with it and say, well, I have to now position this somewhere in my framework of reality and what I believe is possible to understand how I'm going to position this individual.
Yeah.
And perhaps the best thing you can do is just to be humble about it and say, actually, I don't know, but I don't want to ignore it either. And so therefore, I'm going to give myself the opportunity to experience it for myself and to make my own investigation. And that happens not theoretically, but experientially.
Yeah. So basically, what you're, if I summarize what you're saying, you're basically saying everyone has different parameters upon which they define God, right? And everyone's moving the goalposts according to what they believe God should be.
Yeah.
And I think what we're doing is, for me personally, God is the highest personality in your life. And that for me is Guruji. I literally believe just by mere Sangalpa alone, if he's having a cup of tea in his residence and he thinks, you know what? I'm going to give Mayuran God realization. And then drinks a sip of tea. I believe, my heart tells me I will get God realization just by his mere thought. By mere Sangalpa alone, he will be able to deliver that to me. So he is the highest tattva in my life. The other thing is, he is the Lord of my life. And we just discussed that. In your experience, when I've talked about the whole paintbrush, he can dictate the whole trajectory of a soul. And the third thing I would say is, in my life, because he's the highest, because he's the Lord of my life, there is no one else I want to serve. There's no one else I want to serve. You want to serve the world, you want to serve humanity, but ultimately all of that funnels into serving this supreme person who I would class as the Purushottama is Guruji, right? That is how I understand God. Those 3 things, the highest tattva, the Lord of my life, and the one who I want to serve, the ultimate person I want to serve, that is how I define God. And so it's from that premise that I declare Paramahamsa Vishwananda God. And I want to make this point as well, and I think this is a crucial point. If someone pushes me and says to me, yes or no, is Guruji God? I'll say yes, right? I'll say yes. If someone's asked for, give me a sentence to just describe why you think Guruji is God, I would just say like this, my heart tells me he's God, right? Why do I put it like that? It's because I don't want to make the statement and bang my fist on the table and say, I know Paramahamsa Vishwananda is God. The reason why I don't want to say that is because for me, when I use the language, and maybe everyone else uses this language in different ways, and if you're Russian speaking or German speaking, you might have a different translation, but just work with me on why I say this term, I know. I know implies I have conquered. When you say, I know something, right? I know Guruji's God. It implies I have conquered this concept, right? And I get it, and I understand it, and I know it. And I think as devotees, that is a very, very dangerous position to put yourself in. Because I would say to you, I don't know Guruji's God, but my heart tells me he's God. And I think the difference is this. One, I know is a statement that comes from the mind and even from arrogance. My heart tells me is God is to bow down to the very concept of Guruji becoming God, of who he is as God. And I'm bowing down to it saying, look, I want this concept to bless me. I want this concept to shower me with its grace. The moment you say, I know something, you actually close the book on experience, right? And when you bow down to something, even if I bow down to this microphone, I'm telling you, I can learn something from this microphone, right? Anything you bow down to, it will keep giving to you. If I say, I know chapter 7 of the Bhagavad Gita, right? I know all the verses, pearls on a thread and all the rest of it. I know it all, right? Then when I read chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita, I'm not going to learn anything because I know it all, right? But if I constantly in the mood of bowing down, then this concept of Guruji being God, it will keep showering me with more and more and more revelation. So that's why I say my heart tells me that he's God, and rather than I know he's God. And I think that's critical.
But if I can, yeah, I agree. But if I push back quickly on the three things you said, the three reasons for it, I think because people might push back, and I think it'd be good if we address it here. First one, that he's the highest person in your life. Therefore, he's God, or that the definition of God would be that God is the highest person in your life. I would expand that to God is the most important thing in your life, because some people make their job their God. And I mean this not in the sense of a tattva claim. I don't mean it in the claim that now, because this person is the center of my life, I'm saying that they are the God of the universe, of the creator of everything. No, there's a behavioral component to belief in God. And there is the philosophical statement of this is factually God. So what I mean by behavioral component is that if you act as if your job is your God, is the most important thing in your life, it means you orchestrate your whole life around that thing. You're in service to that goal, to that thing which you deem to be the most important. That is what influences all your thoughts, decision-making, everything, right? That you center your life around God. That's the behavioral principle of God. If you look at the psychology of religion, once you believe something or somebody to be God, your life becomes centered around that thing. And I am positing, and I think in support of your first claim, that everybody does this in the world. Everyone has a God of sorts, by that loose definition of the term God.
Yeah.
Obviously, that doesn't mean, however, that we're saying that whoever you act as if is your God becomes the factual God of the universe.
Well, it's what Krishna says. Those who worship devas will go to devas, ancestors to go to ancestors, and so on. He's making a claim that you can have different gods who play the role of God in your life.
Right, that's it. It's a role. It's not a factual claim, this person is God. And so, yes, you could interpret that what you're saying is that Guruji plays the role of God in your life, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's the factual God. However, I believe that we are making the claim that he is factually God beyond just playing the role. Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, as you correctly pointed out, we're not saying we know that to be true. We're saying that we intuit it. Our heart tells us, whatever it may be. Our experiences point towards that, but we're not going to sit here and make the claim that we know for the exact reasons that you pointed out. Now, to piggyback off of those points about knowing, I think that's the fundamental issue. It's the issue. It's the biggest issue. It comes down to this. It's language, and you can say it's semantics, but it's not. It goes far beyond this, because the semantics point to the actual nature of the belief that rests inside of you. If you sit here and say, out of misplaced enthusiasm, naivety, arrogance, as you pointed out, because I think it can be any of those symptoms. I know he's God.
Yeah.
You don't, I'm going to be polite and kind and think, I'm going to say that most cases people haven't just thought it through enough. They're saying it out of naivety, as I said, excitement, whatever it may be, because they do hear that feeling. The heart is telling them something, and they don't know how to articulate that in a way that actually does justice to what is really happening. And so they articulate it in a poor way, which is, I know he's God, instead of saying, my heart tells me he's God.
Yeah. Look, because there are times, why that happens is because there are times, like you see Guruji, he looks amazing and life is great and you feel so connected with him and everything in your life is clear and you want to serve him. You know, you're shedding tears. Maybe someone's singing a great kirtan at the time.
The setting is perfect.
You imagine the scenario. And in those moments, he is God. I know he's God. And yes, you go into that mode. But I still say, let's keep our feet on the ground. Your heart is telling you is God. Because, think about it, when you say, I know Guruji's God, you know what you're doing? You're putting a red flag to a bull. You know what the bull is? Maya. You're putting a red flag to Maya.
That is very true.
And you're saying, come on, Maya. You can't take this belief or this.
Shake my faith.
Shake my faith. I challenge you. And I think, my God, I would never dare go to Maya and say, challenge Maya. I'm too weak. I'm too pathetic. I'm too helpless.
Maya's too strong.
Maya's too strong. And I will never take my faith in Guruji for granted and taunt Maya in that way, right? And so I have a conditioned mind. And if I know that if Guruji presses me, if he challenges me, I always say, in every mind, there's a red button. The nuclear button, right? And you've got it, I've got it, we've all got it. And if Guruji knows where that is, and if he presses that red button,
boom,
right? Suddenly, my heart isn't speaking so loud anymore. Suddenly, I don't know Guruji's God. And don't forget, we're with a Sadguru who is here to challenge your mind. Right? So let's be very, very careful about the words we use and the claims we make. And that's why I say, with all as much humility as I can muster, I bow down to the concept that Guruji is God. My heart tells me he's God. And as long as Guruji allows it, my heart will keep speaking in that way. And I hope and pray he doesn't blink like he did for you and take the whole thing away. It's in his hands. And that's why I'm not confident enough to make the claim, I know he's God.
So I agree with you 100% that it is a challenge to Maya, 100%. And I think there's a second thing it is as well. I think it's an incredibly violent statement. To say, I know he's God is an incredibly violent statement to anyone who hears that statement. Because it's one thing to say it in the privacy of your own home. If you're sitting, in your room contemplating, meditating, doing your sadhana, looking at your altar, you might have a picture of him, whatever it may be, and you say, I know you're God. You're still challenging Maya, but it's not a violent statement. You've not offended anyone. You've not challenged anyone other than yourself, right? But if you go into the masses, you go in front of a microphone, you sit here, what we're doing now, and you make the proclamation, I know he's God. Anyone who's listening to this is going to say, well, if you're saying that, what you mean to say is that he's my God too. He's the source of my being. He's my creator. And that's violent in the sense that you are forcing me to contend with that in an unnatural way.
Not directly, but indirectly implies that. Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's the intention of the person.
Yeah.
But it's indirectly violent, not necessarily directly, not by sankalpa, but nonetheless it will happen. And so this is it's an issue I have with this because it denotes lack of awareness and lack of consideration and respect for the other. Because I have no problem telling somebody that he's God, but I have a problem doing it cold turkey, just sort of dropping it on them and saying, now deal with it and walking away.
Yeah.
I would like to build the case. I would like to get to know the person. I would like to qualify the statement. I would like them to understand why I make such a statement. And again, the statement wouldn't be I know, as we just outlined.
Yeah.
It would be I feel, my heart tells me, I believe. I know and I believe are two very, very different statements, right? So I think first, and to summarize this, we are condemning the use of the language I know. Because of what it entails.
But we have qualified what I know means.
Yes.
Yeah, because like I said, language is different for different people. And if, maybe English is not your first language or you have something in German or Russian, whatever. But I think hopefully people understand what we mean by I know.
For sure.
There was this one time, there was a devotee who came up to me a couple of years ago new-ish devotee, 6 months known Guruji, should we say, and he came up to me and he was like, Mayuran, I know Guruji's Krishna. The statements were coming out. I know he's Narayana. And he was almost crying, right? He was just like so overwhelmed with emotion. I know he's God. And I just sat there like poker face, and because I felt uncomfortable with the way it was being said, right? And then he said to me, Mayuran, you're not saying anything. And I said to him, yeah, I'm not sure what you want me to say. And then he said to me, but what do you think of my realizations? I know it. And I was like, and I said to him, honestly, are you ready to hear what I have to say? And he was like, yeah, say it. And I said, most people who say these things the way you've just said it end up leaving Guruji. And then,
True.
Right? And then he was like, it's quite direct. It's a bit, bit of a slap in the face, whatever. And
when have you been any different?
Yeah, okay, whatever. So then, and I went to Guruji, and I felt there's a slight bit of guilt in me. I was like, well, was that a bit too harsh, right? And then I managed to speak to Guruji, and I told him about the incident, and he said, good, I'm glad you said that. He said, this is actually the reason why I distance myself from people sometimes.
Too ungrounded.
And do you know what happened 6 months after it happened? He left.
Yeah.
Right? And it was
shocker,
right? It was on the cards because he had misinterpreted. That's what I meant. This concept of Guruji being God is a nuclear bomb that can destroy Maya or destroy yourself.
Easy come, easy go. If you build, that's a huge castle. That's not a little house. It's not a hut.
Yeah.
That claim is a palace, right?
Yeah.
And if you build it in 5 minutes, you've clearly not put the foundation.
Exactly.
There's no framework for
You've
this.
You've built a country in 5 minutes.
It's like, it's going to collapse. Just the wind blows once and it goes, it's a house of cards.
Yeah.
That's the fact of the matter. If you want to build something solid, you build it slow. You go step by step. And that doesn't mean that you can't allow your heart to feel and everything else, but let everything else catch up. Let the experiences come. Let the rationale come. Be grounded. Keep your feet on the ground. Live your current reality. And I think one of the problems of spirituality is because we feel that there's truth behind every element of it. We sit and meditate and we feel like, wow, I really am a soul. There's something beyond my body and my mind. Amazing.
Yeah.
All of these things that we intuit and that we feel bit by bit in drops, we have the tendency to get a drop and think we have a liter bottle.
Yeah.
We have the source. We have everything. And then you start to act as if you do. And that's the definition of ungroundedness. It's to live a reality other than the one that you factually have.
Yeah.
And so whether it's in the past, in the future, whatever it may be, you create a fantasy and you dive into it head first. Don't be surprised if the world slaps you for it.
Yeah.
And the world, Guruji, whatever, it's all orchestrated, monitored, controlled by God. So God is in a way slapping you for faking. For faking, knowingly or unknowingly, faking belief.
It's called unsecured borrowing, right, in the finance world, right? It's basically going to the bank and saying, can I borrow £1 million? And they say, have you got any assets that I can secure this against? You're like, yeah, I'm sure there's some houses that I own. And it's like, oh, great, I'll give you all this money. And then eventually they go, can we have the money back? And wait, I don't, I spend it all, but you've got those houses. Actually, I took around, I don't have any houses. Unsecured borrowing, it means you have no real conviction in your heart, no real experience on which you're basing this on. You're just claiming stuff in an ungrounded way. And that's just something we have to be absolutely vigilant of. It's so dangerous.
Agreed. So just again to sort of segment what we're doing. So we've mapped out that he's not an ordinary being and the kind of experiences that we've had that point us in that direction. Some in a more deep way than others, right? And it leads to a construct of the definition of what God is. And I'm saying that there are so many competing definitions of what God is. And so that's a problem in of itself. And then I believe some of the definitions about who God is, such as creator of the universe, are so beyond our capacity to comprehend and so beyond our tools of comprehension that it's almost irrelevant. Those definitions are almost nice to know theoretical concepts, but they will never be the ones that we will actually be able to attest to and build our faith around. And the same is true for any other claim of God. Like I said, the followers of Jesus didn't believe he's God because they saw him creating universes, but rather because they saw him performing immediate miracles that were perceptible to their senses in a grounded way. The same goes for Krishna, the same goes for every other claimant that has ever lived, in a sense, right? So that's one thing, the standard of giving the label of God to someone. Then you've mapped out your reasons for why you believe Guruji is God in your life. And it's come, and I'm careful in using the language that you believe, because it's come down to us now flipping the coin and saying, okay, we've made a case for why we tend to go in this direction. But there's the other side of the coin now, which is well, what other directions do people go in, and what do they say about it that we don't agree with and that we, in a sense, condemn? Because I think part of this grounding exercise, which was one of the intent of the podcast, is that you can say, this is how you can make the claim, this is how you should not make the claim.
Yeah.
Right? So just to continue going down that road of how you should not make the claim, I want to add a few points to this, because I think it needs to be fully understood. And I appreciate that this is now a point more for the Bhakti Marga devotee than it is for anybody else that may be listening to this, because clearly you're not making that claim.
Yeah.
But I want you to hear this nonetheless, because it's about understanding, if you ever hear anybody making that claim, if you ever see anybody making that claim, please remember this conversation. I would be very pleased if you would.
Okay.
There are people who, in their enthusiasm, in their experiences that they may have, jump the gun, as we said, and they make a big claim. I know he's God. I really know it. And they start telling people. And I've said that I think that's a violent thing to do. There are other ways that they do this. It's not just in verbal conversations, and this is something that we've discussed before, and we've had conversations with other people as well. You start to see pictures, people posting pictures of like Krishna's body with Guruji's face on it, right? That becomes tattoos. I've seen people go and get tattoos done of 6 arms, 4 arms, whatever, and then Guruji's face is there, right? Or Krishna playing the flute, Guruji's face, yeah? These sort of things. We've discussed this privately off camera and what we think about this, and I think it's actually, as silly as it may sound, I think it's an important point to be made, because it's behavioral consequences to the ungrounded conception of the belief. Map out for me what you think that means, and what people should be mindful of when they go down that road.
Is this podcast like for free speech and stuff like that?
Whilst remaining relatively gentlemanly, yes.
Okay. Look, I'm not a fan of it. I spoke to a devotee, and she made a really good point. She just said, why do you need to leverage Guruji's form with another form of God? Guruji is his own divinity. He's doing his own leela. He's his own personality. Why do you need to leverage that onto another Vishnu Tattva form just to almost bolster his divinity? It's not necessary. So that's one point. The other point is this: why I don't like it is, when I see these things, there's something instinctive in me that doesn't like it. And my mind is playing catch up as going, why don't you like it? Why is it bothering you? And I think it's because this is such a profound concept of Guruji being God. I mean, come on, man. That has got to be one of the most unbelievable statements you could possibly make. This personality, this Mauritian man with the lovely smile, the dark skin and the long hair, is God. And for me to amalgamate and make a statement of, put his face on, say, Vittal or Ram or Krishna or whatever, it's too cheap, it's too easy, it's too premature. You're trying to join that idea at a material level when it needs to be a revelation of the heart at a transcendent level. Yeah. And you're prematurely trying to claim it. And to me, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there are some devotees who don't have this notion, but it's a symptom of that concept of, I know he's God. It reeks of that symptomatic of, I know he's God, rather than I bow down to the concept of him becoming God. I mean, what did Guruji say last night in the satsang, right? Amazing satsang Guruji gave last night. And he said, I asked a question, right? And then he said, what was that devote thing you said before? I said, I want to know the swarupa of Guruji. And he was like, forget about the swarupa of the Guru. He was like, look at yourself. And he basically making the point, are you even a human being? Do you even have knowledge? Have you even transformed anything in your life? And have you passed down that transformation to the rest of the world, right? What use are you? And then you want to talk about the swarupa of the Guru. It's like, get the basics right. Become a devotee, become grounded, become focused, learn the little that he's given. And then, maybe later on, we understand the swarupa of the Guru. So it's this premature amalgamation and forcing Guruji as God at the lowest level, putting it on Facebook or whatever it is. For me, it just doesn't sit right.
I agree with you, and I'll go further, because it's... I find it offensive. Just as I said the previous claim was violent, I find this one offensive.
You're going further than me, I think.
Yeah. And that's okay, because I think it's important people hear this. I think it's offensive because if you're doing this, and I'm going to actually caveat that statement because I have a filter, I have a personal filter that I've shared with you as well, where I think if you do these things in private, I have no issues with it whatsoever. If you have in your room a picture of Narayana with Guruji's face on it, it's a faith claim. It's what you believe. It's what you want to see. It's your meditation. It's your picture. It's your way of conceptualizing of Guruji and God and whatever. And if you do that as a sadhana, like I want to see the unity of my Guru and Bhagavan, and this is how I conceive of it, I've got no issues with this whatsoever. And even if that becomes a tattoo...
On a personal level, in your own prayer room, you're fine.
How can I criticize that? It is the person's individual relationship with God, and I have no issues with that, right? On a personal level. And if that becomes a tattoo, but it's in a private place where you see it, you're not advertising it to the world or using it as a claim to others, for example, I have zero issues with it, really, zero. And you do you. The minute it becomes something that is made public, whether in song, in lyrics, or in photos, or in tattoos, or in conversations, whatever it may be, I find that there's that violent element that I've discussed earlier, because you're forcing someone to contend with something that I believe to be unnatural. It's not the right way to construct the case and build it for the person. But two, because I think 9 times out of 10, the person will not be able to contextualize what the others have just seen. So you post a picture.
Yeah.
Have you given verses of contextualization underneath the picture? No, they just post it and go, so beautiful.
So beautiful.
Put a heart. Yeah. No, you need to be more responsible with this.
Yeah.
Because you're provoking people's minds and you're not helping them get through the provocation.
If you're another Vaishnava, right, you know Krishna, there's a whole leela, there's a whole personality there. He did things, he said things, he performed leelas, all kinds of miraculous things. Now, are you saying you know that Guruji lifted Govardhana Hill? So when we go to Vrindavan, as we just went just now recently, are you saying, I know Guruji lifted that mountain on his little finger for 7 days and 7 nights? Right?
You just saying that makes me like, oh, this is such nonsense. It's such nonsense.
Look, philosophically, I'm open to anything, but it's beyond the realm of my experience.
No, I believe he did. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah.
I do believe Guruji did it. But I would never say it because it's just so silly. It's so unnecessary. It's so unnecessary. And this is the crux of it. I know it's going to annoy a lot of people. I know it's going to offend a lot of people. And it doesn't do anything to bolster my faith or the faith of others. Because for me, if you need to go to the point of saying Guruji lifted Govardhan Hill to make anyone feel that he's glorious, then you haven't understood and observed his life for 1 second. Because Guruji doesn't need to borrow from any other incarnations, activities and lives in order to be glorious. That's why I find it a little offensive. Because when you paint Guruji's face onto Krishna, what are you saying? That his current body isn't glorious enough? When you start saying, but Guruji came out of the pillar and killed Hiranyakashipu, why do you need to latch onto Nrsingadev's accomplishments? Is Guruji's own coming out of the pillar of this world and into your life and destroying your ego not glorious enough?
Yeah.
And this I find to be it's rasa basa. You're mixing rasas and moods and personalities because here we have to understand philosophically the distinction between the tattva and then the various identities that tattva assumes. Because we're saying there's Vishnu tattva, there's the supreme reality, the supreme Lord, who is personal and is a person, right?
Yeah.
But he assumes various identities in various different incarnations. And he very clearly presents himself in a very unique way in each of those. When he comes as Krishna, he did not behave as he did when he came as Rama.
Yeah.
By his own will. Very clearly, he makes a separation. So why do we, as his servants and devotees, do away with that separation and say, I know you're presenting yourself in a different and unique way because clearly you want to, but I don't agree with it. I don't like it. So I'm going to do away with that separation and I'm going to make you like you were before. And I'm not going to, it's like a disrespect. I'm not respecting the fact that you've come in a different way.
Yeah, for me, I mean, that's your way of why it irritates you a little bit. But for me, it's just a simple case of, I just want to stay in my lane. I just want to stay in my lane. And my lane is that he's the Lord of my life. He's orchestrating my life. There's no one else I want to serve apart from this personality. And yes, Krishna is God and he did these leelas and so on. But I just don't want to join the two because I just want to stay in my lane with Guruji, right? And this is where I come from on this topic. Now, we have to also look at the other side of the coin. What Guruji does say. Ultimately speaking, we worship the Ishtadev to see that the Ishtadev is non-different from Guruji himself, right? So that is the ultimate goal. But you know what Guruji said in Mauritius once? Powerful statement. He said, when the devotee is very advanced and reached a high level of realization, he says the Guru orders the heart to reveal that the Ishtadev and Guru are one and the same, right? You have to understand this revelation of, I know that Guruji is Krishna, I know Guruji is Bhagavan. It comes from his kripa. It comes from his mercy, and he orders the heart to reveal itself. Just like in chapter 10, Krishna says, I lift a lamp of knowledge to dispel the darkness of ignorance. He goes in the heart and he orders that revelation to happen. I don't want to force that revelation with my mind. Or just force it because philosophically it makes sense. A equals B, so that means A equals, and B equals C, so that means A equals C. Therefore, Krishna must be God. Therefore, Guruji must have lifted Govardhana mountain and he must have built the bridge to Lanka. Oh yeah, I don't want to go down this route, right?
Yeah.
Right? That's a revelation that is born of the heart that comes through kripa, and I don't want to force that revelation prematurely.
Agreed. And I think another thing that people might be feeling or thinking when listening to this is, you're right in saying that, we have to be grounded because our minds don't know that he is. By your definition of like owning something, dominating the thing.
Yeah.
Clearly we don't, right? But I have said this before, and I think, like, for example, maybe my heart knows. Like my Atma knows certainly, but my heart maybe knows as well. And the way to then therefore conceive of that, in my opinion, is that we are fragmented beings. We all fragmented beings. We have so many parts to us.
Yeah.
So many identities, so many parts that are contending with each other. And so I think as a whole, as a sort of completion of my organic unity of various parts, I don't know. Parts of me may know, but until those parts dominate all other parts, or until the whole being collectively has a consensus and then surrenders, it's impossible to represent the one as if it stands for the whole.
That's
of
right.
my being.
I mean, you made the point when we were discussing this before, some time ago. You said, I know sugar's bad for me.
Yeah.
I know, right? I know, let's use the term, I know sugar is bad for me. But yet
I eat it.
Yet I still eat it, even though I know it's bad for me, right? And that's because of what you just said. We are fragmented beings. We have different voices competing inside of ourselves.
My intellect knows the sugar's bad, but my senses say sugar's good.
Ahankara says, that's my cake,
and
right?
There's the conflict.
Yeah, and there's so many conflicts inside of ourselves. And so that's where we're at with Guruji at the moment. The heart is speaking, sometimes very loudly, sometimes very convincingly. We have smelt the fragrance, but we have not seen the rose itself. And the heart is speaking of the fragrance. And sometimes it's so strong, the fragrance, right? It's so strong. Other times it's not, because of these other competing things that are going on. But I say this, when you know Guruji is God, you have smelt the fragrance and you have seen the rose. And I believe when you have seen the rose, you cannot go back. All the other voices are obliterated, right? And that's what I mean. Only a saint, really, in my opinion, can say, I know Guruji is God. Only a saint, because all the other...
Fully realized.
Because then Maya cannot touch them. The conditioned mind cannot thwart their ways, right? And all these other competing voices are being obliterated because they're in the Swarupa of Guruji. They are immersed in it. Tadatmaya. They're completely immersed in it, right? And so that is the point where the saint is qualified to say, I know Guruji is God. Until then, I will always say, my heart tells me is God, because I'm worried of my mind, I'm worried of Maya, and that's the problem.
But there's a behavioral component to that as well. So, as you said, the competing voices will go away. True, but the competing voices are just thoughts, and thoughts manifest as behaviors. So, if you really own this, like if you really go to the point where I know, and it's an actual realization, your entire behavior will change. You
Completely.
will no longer do the things that you currently do.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, look, I know many really great devotees, really, really great devotees that I look up to in many ways, in many parts of their lives. But there's not a single devotee that I look up to in every part of his life. Yeah, I can point out as many great devotees as I can name to you. I can always, if I want to go fault finding, I'll find you faults, right? Now, there's two points to that. I can probably do that with Guruji too. The issue there is that it comes down to the nature of God and how he presents himself. Because Krishna says that in the Gita, that the fools disregard me in my human form. They don't recognize me as who I truly am. Why? Because, he's displaying human form and human behavior. Yeah. And so you create an idea in your head of the optimal ideal person and how they should behave, think, act, etc. And you measure people against that, right?
Yeah.
And I find that to be just a flaw of human thinking. And so I have that flaw in me too, which is why I'm even, the possibility for me to attribute fault to Guruji is very much alive inside of me, right? Because of the fragment inside of me. My heart, my Atma knows that he's not making mistakes. He is the perfect orchestrator of every moment and every situation. But my mind goes, oh, he just said a word in the wrong way.
Yeah.
Or he just did this wrong, or he just did that wrong, or whatever. So this fragmented thing is a behavioral, leads to behavioral consequences that I want to eliminate. I mean, as much as I can sit here in this podcast and even in private afterwards, I'll tell you, I genuinely believe that he is God. That same person who's telling you this knows that my mind judges him. My mind attributes error to him. How could that be compatible with belief that he's God?
Yeah.
Because I don't believe in a God that is flawed. I don't believe in a God that is fallible. Forget it. I don't.
Yeah.
It's illogical. There is no foundation to believe such a thing. And yet I do. That is for me the greatest self-evidence of the fragmented conflict inside of myself.
Yeah, you're actively demonstrating it in real time. I mean Guruji, Krishna says in the Gita, he says, I'm the origin of everything. Everything comes from me. Those who know this about me, right? Iti matva, they bhajanti man, they worship me. And what he's saying in that statement is, once you know that I'm God, you will surrender to me. It's not even a choice. You don't get to say, I know he's God, just not feeling the surrender right now. No. The knowledge of God automatically compels you to surrender.
Yeah.
It automatically compels you to surrender. And this is the point. You can't say, I know he's God, but I just don't want to follow everything Guruji says and his Adesh is a bit too tough for me. No, it doesn't work like that. You are surrendered if you know he's God. And more than that, Krishna says in chapter 11, I am time, I'm destiny, right? And he says, I'm life itself. And what he's basically saying is, once you know me as God, you will see that your very life is me. Is the very personification of me. So when you know Guruji's God, your life becomes Guruji. Literally becomes, I don't mean metaphorically here, I don't mean theoretically or philosophically, I mean literally your life is Guruji. And so if there's any part of you that resents your life, oh my God, I don't really want to get up in the morning and do this. Oh, why is this happening to me? Why this person doesn't like me? If there's any kind of resentment in your life, you don't see life as Guruji, right? And then you don't know Guruji's God. So what I'm trying to say is, it's a package deal. To know Guruji's God is to be surrendered, and it is to know that your life is Guruji and everything is perfection of Guruji.
Surrender, acceptance, gratitude for every moment is the natural consequence of, if you see it as really coming from him and being him, then you're going to be constantly in acceptance and grateful for everything that comes your way.
Absolutely.
Without exception.
Yeah, and who does that?
Nah,
the saints.
Exactly.
The saints do that because they know Vittal is God. They know Krishna is God. They know Guruji's God.
Architect of their life.
That's it. And so this is the most important thing. But, you raised a question, like an accusation, I think it was, Swami Revatikaanta.
Go ahead.
Yeah. You said to me, sometimes there's some people who say, oh, Myron, you speak about Guruji as being God. And
yeah. And I was having a conversation yesterday, just before we recorded this, because I was talking to Swami Aniruddha, and then he goes to me, who's your next guest? I said, I'm going to do a second episode with Myron. And we were talking about what the topic is, and I said, we're going to discuss the whole concept of Guruji being God, because I think it's a very misunderstood concept, and we really need to ground it. Yeah. And he goes, Myron, Myron. Myron's always doing this. One day he's saying Guruji is God, the next day he says, no, you can't say he's God. You can't say he's God. And so he's just like, what is it? Which one is it, Myron? Settle it.
Right, so this is where
accusation.
Defend
yourself.
Refutation coming, right? So he makes a very good point. So I'm an absolute hypocrite in some way after everything we've just said. Look, it's like this. Guruji is God. I always describe it as having a 6 million, I don't know why I say 6 all the time, but $6 million.
6 qualities, Bhagwan.
That's why. That's the reason why, right? So $6 million diamond, right? Now, when you have a $6 million diamond, what do? You put it in a safe, you put it under a combination lock, you don't tell many people about it, at least you don't advertise it on the newspaper or whatever it is, right, in the front of your house. It's there. When you want to show that diamond, what do? You open it very carefully, you combination lock, and then you open it up, you have it on one of those cushioned pillows, you wear those nice gloves, and then you show it to the right audience at the right time, and everyone looks at this amazing diamond and they gasp in the beauty of this diamond. That is how my heart says Guruji is God should be presented, right? It should be presented like that. It should not be presented as a $6 million diamond by the Bhajan Cafe while you're having a cup of chai and rolling it around next to your cupcake, right?
Flicking the diamond around.
Yeah, and having a conversation, flicking, scrolling on your phone. That is what I'm rallying against. This ungrounded cheapening of, like, one time it was Krishna's birthday, right? Janmashtami celebrations, and then someone was giving a talk, and they went, it's Guruji's birthday today, and then he goes, oh sorry, no, I mean Krishna's birthday. And
it's all the same.
And then he goes, it's all the same anyway. And I just thought my hand was in my head, just going, oh. Right, that's what I class as rolling out the $6 million diamond and the Bhajan Cafe. Right? No, there is a way of delivering the amazing concept of Guruji becoming God to the right audience, building it in the right context, with real sincerity, with real groundedness, with real articulation, using the right words that glorify him in a humble way. If you can do that, then by all means, let's present this $6 million diamond to the world, right? So I'm not saying don't shy away from it, but this is the caveat of this whole podcast, I probably would say, that you can speak of Guruji as becoming as God, but do it in the right way.
Yeah. And maybe if you allow me to speak for you in this moment, I think it's also fair to say we haven't maybe always got it right.
Yeah, fair enough.
And that's not a problem. I mean, I can apologize, but I think it's part of this evolutionary process of understanding that it's contending with my fragmented nature. It's not being fully aware of how arrogant I was being. It's not being fully aware of the consequences of my words and not having thought about it deeply enough, because I think one of the greatest things that every human being should do in every facet of their life is to think deeply. And how can you judge me pre-thinking deeply in comparison to post-thinking deeply about a topic?
I disagree with you on that a little bit.
Go ahead.
So basically, I always believe that I don't believe you need to be a deep thinker. I think you just need to be sincere. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you're humble, Krishna says, Dadami Buddhi Yogam, that I give you the understanding, right? If you constantly are sincere with Guruji and you're humble with Guruji and you're grateful with Guruji, automatically wisdom will descend upon you. You don't need to be a deep thinker. You don't need to be a deep thinker.
I think being humble is harder than thinking deeply.
Being humble is, possibly.
So the reason I'm
definitely, in fact.
Anyone can think deeply about things relatively easily. To be humble is not an easy thing.
Right.
The reason I'm pointing to thinking deeply is because I think that Dadami Buddhi Yoga, the help of Krishna or the help of the master, comes when there is effort on your side first. Yeah. Right. Being humble is a transformation. It's an effort. It is something that you have to actively do, that you actually pursue and then live out. Unless you're blessed to be that way, but you've built that up over lifetimes. It's not that you've just arrived at randomly being humble. And so I think that there is something that on your end that then merits a response of sorts, right? And that can, I'm not trying to create a meritorious system now where you get corresponding to what you do. The help will be disproportionate. I'm not saying that, I'll do a little bit and I'll get this much help from God. That is the nature of God. That is the benevolent nature of God. He's our well-wisher and our friend, etc. But I think that thinking deeply is almost like a communication to God, a language to God, showing I'm really trying. I'm trying to get to this in a proper way. I'm trying to find the right attitude, the right conduct, the right whatever. And just the trying has for me always been enough to see Guruji shower mercy. I've never seen him require success to shower mercy.
It's a kind of tapasya is what you're talking about. Yeah.
And I think it's a more accessible tapasya, and it's something that I can feel comfortable asking someone to do. If I tell them, be humble.
Yeah, just be humble. Yeah, fine. Yeah.
I feel like I'm being a bit unfair to them because even I'm incapable of doing that often.
Yeah.
Circumstantially, I'm circumstantially humble.
Yeah.
I'm circumstantially arrogant. But I can be consistently a deep thinker. And that can be something else as well. I can also be consistently a servant. Like for example, if I'm struggling with something, you know what? Just make use of myself and serve. Like I think that's also a valid thing. But make some step in the direction that you think will show God your intent, your sankalpa.
Yeah.
So behind my deep thinking is a sankalpa of I'm trying to make it better. I'm trying to improve.
Yeah. Look, the point you made about us getting it wrong sometimes, we shouldn't beat ourselves up over that. It's because look, this is I said this right at the beginning. I'll say it again. This is knife edge stuff. This is like the Guruji tattva. I know like some people don't like me saying that, but I'm just gonna say it anyway. But like, It's knowing
I like it.
Yeah, thank you. But the tattva of Guruji is like walking a knife edge. It's very, very thin, and you have to be very, very careful and sincere in the way you are walking this. And you can easily slip off one side and say, "Oh, he's God," or on the other side and say, "No, actually, he's not God at all." And and you can go both ways, right? And so it is a very difficult tightrope. And you know what makes it difficult? He's in the body, right? He's there. He's singing in the temple. He's giving darshan. He's giving satsangs. If, a saint who's left the body.
Static figure.
Static figure. You got the narrations, got the nice biographies, you got the nice experiences, and you can just do what you want with it. Project your own stuff
Construct the image. There's nothing he's going to do that's going to change that.
Yeah, it's fixed. And why do you think the Catholic Church likes to make saints after they die, right? They're not a problem.
Because if you do it while they're alive, they might still do something. They might go against the church, and then
what? Exactly.
Then
anarchy, whatever, And so
gotta wait till they die
this
first.
is why Bhakti Marga devotees have a much greater responsibility in presenting Guruji as God than any other movement of their guru or master or saint.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. There was, there is another, I think it's a criticism that I've gotten recently even. I gave a satsang in the temple.
Who dared criticize you?
I forgot her name actually, it was one devotee. But I gave a satsang in the temple on last Sunday, and I was what I usually am. I was quite tough and direct and whatever else. And this person wrote in the YouTube live stream comments, and then the devotees sent it to me because they thought it was funny. The ones who are like running the live stream.
Right.
But basically, she wrote, I really like listening to Swami Revatikaanta's satsangs, but I always feel like he's angry at us. And I just want to say that, life is hard. I'm doing my best. Yeah. Guruji loves me, Jai Gurudev, something of that nature.
Yeah,
right?
fair enough.
And I had been saying in my satsang that basically it's not in the comfort zone that you grow and that you learn. Guruji is constantly trying to take us out of our comfort zone because it's out of your comfort zone where real transformation tends to happen. It's not when you're sitting in your comfort zone. And I was, again, quite firm about that at that point. And I almost read this and I thought, you just proved my point. You're being uncomfortable listening to me, and you'd rather come back into the comfort zone of like not being told off, in a sense, right? Because if you're being told, good job, everything's fine, it feels better, but I suspect less growth is happening because of that. Now, I'm not aloof to empathy and compassion. I understand that these things are necessary, and I have them, believe me, but I also think that there's a limit to them and how and when you should have them. I think there are moments where you're not supposed to pat someone on the back, and you're supposed to say, no, you've made a mistake. And you need to own that. You need to realize the depth of your mistake so that you can make sure you never do it again.
Look, if we love Guruji, if we, what does that even mean? That's another podcast.
Fragmented. Parts of me love and parts don't.
I just said that, and I just thought, wow, I've got to be careful here.
What is love?
Yeah, so
Your
look,
podcast.
If we want to attain Guruji, if we want to advance on this path, we've just got to look at, we've got to run to these areas that we don't want to go to. If we suspect there's something underneath that table, and that is going to be the thing that I hate most, that is most scary to me, let's lift it up. Let's just open the whole thing up and let's look at it. That to me is courage. That to me is sincerity. And if we can muster that's one of a tremendous asset to have.
And there I think comes the marriage of humility and confidence. Sincerity is the glue between those two things. Because, for example, if someone's confident, it can very quickly go into arrogance. Which then humility has gone out the window. There's no chance that you're both arrogant and humble at the same time. Those things are polar opposites, right? But someone being confident and humble at the same time is confident in your pursuit, in your intentions, in your sincerity, in what you're trying to achieve, but humble enough to know your limitations, humble enough to know, I don't know Guruji's God, but I feel he is, and I'm going to be confident about that feeling, and I'm going to be confident in my pursuit of wanting to turn that belief into a realization. And so it's a marriage that is possible, but it requires the foundation to be that humility and that for me is the result of deep thinking, but it can arrive in different ways, which is everything we mapped out today, the groundedness, the sincerity of like, I realized that it would be foolish of me to make this proclamation or that proclamation. And so now that I know what is the no-go zone, I can be safely confident because I'm going to be confident knowing very well what my parameters are, what my boundaries are. So I'm going to be confident within a very grounded and restricted zone. Yeah. It's not boundless confidence. That's arrogance.
Yeah. Now, I hope this conversation has, look, I'm not telling devotees, I'm not an authority to tell devotees what to think, but I hope that it's been a little bit thought-provoking, and maybe each individual has to decide for themselves where their boundaries are and what does it mean for them to say Guruji is God, and understand the power of words, understand the self-talk, what you tell yourself, the language you use to yourself, and the actions. The actions are also a language, right? And actions are probably the strongest representation of language rather than the words themselves sometimes, right? How you act is more of an indicator of what you believe than what you just say. So I hope this conversation has allowed a devotee to really think about the concept of Guruji being God. What on earth does that mean? What does that mean for me? Why do I believe he's God? Do I believe he's God? You know, and start wrestling with those ideas to be as sincere and grounded as we possibly can, because that is where the magic happens. It happens in groundedness, not in taking off into fantasy.
Agreed. And I'll sign off under that, as in that we've made our message to the devotees. Don't need to add anything to that. I would like to end the episode on one more discussion, one point that I would like to bring up for the public, not for the devotee now, because I'm throughout the conversation, I'm constantly aware of something in the background, which is that person that may be watching this, and predominantly those who already come from maybe a more Hindu background, Sanatana Dharma, or accept the Bhagavatam as an authority or whatever else, that person who will be listening to this going, all well and good, I understand the framework you guys have presented, and you know, clearly you're making a sincere effort to ground the claim and to not go into fantasy and everything else. But let's just take a step back and realize you're still claiming he is God. Yeah. And on what grounds? And okay, you've shared some experiences, but God, there has to be a standard definition for God. There has to be some understanding. And why I'm raising this is what I want to bring up is there is, you know, we know about verses in the Bhagavatam that talk about hiding one's true nature for a particular reason, and also about the limitation of Shastra. I want to point to two verses specifically. When the Bhagavatam in Canto 1 lists the various incarnations of the Lord, it concludes by saying, however, there are many more, right? Like rivulets stemming from a river that are not mentioned here. Yeah. So first proposition. Second proposition, when the Bhagavatam is describing the various stages of sannyas, it culminates in the Paramahamsa. Yeah. And the Bhagavatam is not necessarily saying that the Paramahamsa is God. That's not the claim I'm making. But when it's describing the nature of the Paramahamsa, it consistently has one language that it uses to describe it across many cantos, but specifically in Canto 11, chapter 18, it says that the Paramahamsa is one way, but should present himself another way. In many ways, in terms of his competence, knowledge, behavior, adherence to rules and regulations, all of this. Although he knows the rules, should not follow them. Although he is knowledgeable, should present himself as being dumb, etc., etc.
This is the symptom of a Paramahamsa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So the Paramahamsa behaves externally in a way that is the antithesis of his actual nature. It is in direct opposition to his actual nature. We know that Krishna has his Yogmaya that covers him. It makes it clear in the Bhagavad Gita. His Yogmaya deludes the individual that engages with him and sees him. And historical testimony would attest to that, because not everybody that met Krishna went, oh, Bhagavan. Right? The reason I'm pointing this out is because I still believe to this day, in the wider religious landscape, there is too much arrogance about how easy it is to recognize God, or how easy it theoretically should be. And the reason I say that is because of how easily people dismiss our claims. Saying, Paramahamsa Vishwananda, no way he can be God. Nonsense. What nonsense rascals here making these nonsense claims, right? Yeah. I've seen it in forums, I've seen it in YouTube comments, I've seen it in social media comments. It's universal. And I'm not attributing this to any specific group of people, but usually it will be people who are more interested in Hinduism in general, because that's why they're engaging with the content, right? But they'll dismiss the claim. I want to hear your thoughts, but I'm making the proposition from my end. If you're dealing with a tradition that has Bhagavan himself claiming that he covers himself with his Yogmaya and most people do not recognize him, if you're dealing with a tradition in which the Shastra says there are many incarnations of God and not all of them are contained within Shastra, that statement needs to go out the window. And third, if the Shastra is indicating its most elevated souls to obscure their nature and to behave in a way that is not correspondent to who they actually are, from where do people get the confidence to dismiss these claims when they subscribe to the very framework that presents these issues?
It's the very same arrogance we talked about. I know, right? So when you dismiss these claims, you're saying, I know he's not God. And I would say I know is a dangerous claim on anything, because I think when you pin it down, we know almost nothing, right? Apart from the fact that you exist, there's almost nothing else you know, right? For sure, because I'm putting that premise there. So when people say, I know he's not God, and they dismiss the whole thing, that is just reeks of absolute arrogance, especially you've just laid down a Shastric case for those, say, Vaishnavas or Hindus who follow that tradition. To dismiss our claims so overtly, so confidently is pure arrogance. At the same time, you can't expect them to embrace the claims, right? And because, there is that they could easily argue that the points you've made have just provided a smokescreen for anyone to claim they're God. Right,
but actually, we have left the door open, and that's I see that as a strength.
Yeah,
I am making the claim Guruji's God, contextualized by the entire discussion we've just had, but that isn't a claim that closes the door for anyone else to be.
Yeah.
The God that I believe in, Sriman Narayana, as presented in Shastra, is not incapable of manifesting in myriad ways at many times, even at the same time. Zero parts or consequences of my belief or my claims that I have made eliminate the possibility of him being other people also being God.
Look, I hear there are many traditions of living masters where I hear their disciples say, he is God, he is Krishna. I don't dismiss those claims.
Yeah.
I just suspend my judgment. That's all you can do. That's all you can do. And if you get any more of an experience or connection or more convincing argument, then fair enough. You can venture forward and say, yeah, actually it could be true. There's something truth there. Fair enough. But at the very least, our default position should just be suspending your judgment. Okay, you claim that. Harry Ball. Does it make you happy? Are you advancing on your path? Are you transforming? Do you feel a deeper connection? Who am I? Who am I to get there?
I like that, because it's the only thing I sometimes do point people towards, because I've been in situations like that when I go outside, I'm giving a lecture and someone comes and says, Swamiji, what's your opinion on Guru such and such? There's devotees claim that he's God. You're right. I don't dismiss the claim outright. I don't go like that. But I might say it's very important that we assess the groundedness of the claimant and the claim. The same thing we're trying to do here, right? Because I do think that there are, and I accept, I have opened the door to anyone claiming to some extent, right? That, oh yeah, he's God. And I think therefore that the least you can request of them, and you can request of yourself if you're the one making such a claim, is groundedness, and that you present it in the humble, grounded way that has been done so far. And then I think we can have a coexistent, harmonious relationship between those claims. I think when the claim starts being he is and yours are bogus and it's an offensive, then we have to play a different game.
Look, I mean, Hinduism doesn't suffer from exclusivity, broadly speaking. Like, if you don't convert to my religion, you're going to go to hell and be damned. But it does suffer from supremacist movements, denominations claiming excessively that they have the best way to truth, the highest way, and everything else is a kind of lesser way, subordinate way. And it becomes, this is the greatest tragedy of Sanatana Dharma. And I know it's something that Guruji laments about often, traveling in India, the lack of unity. And I think Bhakti Marga, under Guruji's grace and guidance, I don't think we would ever become that kind of movement, because you see Guruji, he embraces everybody.
Yeah.
Even if he understands the philosophical differences, he knows there's a philosophical chasm in some situations between us and other movements, but he appreciates the tradition and what the emphasis on trying to advance and transform. And so we must reach common ground as Hindus and Sanatana Dharma and those who follow the Shastra points that you mentioned, instead of just casting judgment and dismissing. It's childish, it's immature, and it's very sad to see.
I can sign on everything you just said. I think there's 2 points also. One is that, we have a Saints Museum here at the ashram, and in that Saints Museum we have Advaitic saints, we have Shaivite saints, we have saints of every type of tradition. And I've had people come before and say, but as a Vaishnava, how do you see them? I'm like, what use are they to you? I said, what use are they to me? They were disciplined. They were dedicated. They were surrendered to whatever they were doing. If that already is not something that I can draw from in an inspiring way, because I need that, then what on earth are we doing here?
Yeah, can I make a confession? Yeah. Right. So I used to read the book I Am That. Right, right. I know. Please don't judge me.
You're not coming for a third episode.
So I Am That, for those who don't know, is like this very famous book written by a Jnani called Nisargadatta Maharaj, and it's all about I am the I, and he doesn't really believe in God. Definitely not bhakti. It's about contemplation, inquiry, and that you are the supreme. I am the supreme, the I. And yes, all of those statements now in the face of Guruji's teachings don't make any sense. At least they are certainly not what Guruji teaches, not in alignment with what Guruji teaches. But one thing I always still take from what he said, and I take this from Nisarga Maharaj as a great personality for this reason, not for the teachings, but for this reason, is he said, my Guru came to me and said to me, you are the supreme, right? Okay, an Advaitic statement, right? You are the supreme. And then and that's all he said when he was like 38 or something like that. And he said he had like 1 or 2 meetings with him. And he said, all I did in my spare time, and he had to work and everything else, I thought of what my Guru told me. I thought of his face. I thought of the tone of voice. I thought of his expression. And that's all I did. Kept thinking about him. And then I found that his words became true in my being. Right, and he was realized as he said in about 3 years' time. Now, whether you agree with his state of realization being the highest or his teachings or whatever it is, wow! Look at the discipline, look at the focus. It was Guru Bhakti. It was Guru Bhakti. I mean, I want that. I should, the things that Guruji's told me, that Ardeshi's told me, I should just be sitting there in my spare time, imagining his face, imagining the tone of voice, his expression, and that should be the pinnacle that guides my whole life.
Imbibing what he has said to you. And
and maybe if we had the intensity that Nisarga Maharaj had for his Guru and we had that for Guruji, we might be somewhere else by now.
No, that's exactly the point I was making, and I think therefore we need to just broaden our minds. The second and final point, Krishna presents a lot of hierarchies in the Gita. This is better than that. This is superior to this. I can't reject the text. It is what it is. It's very clear that he does. Chapter 12 begins with a question, which is better? And he says, this one.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the others are useless, first point, by any stretch of the imagination. But what I think is a problem is that Krishna can do that because he's God. Yeah, of course he can say this is better than that, because from his perspective, he's able to, in light of knowing that he is the goal, arrange things in a way of most suitability, most practical, less practical, whatever it may be, and make a hierarchy. I'm not against us as followers of Krishna and as people who study his dialogue, explaining those hierarchies. I definitely teach that. When I teach the Gita, I teach those hierarchies to people all the time. I have a problem not with the teaching of that knowledge and passing that information. I have a problem with labeling people as belonging to this or to that, because you don't know the full dimension of what's going on in a person's spiritual life. Yeah. And so it's like, I can tell you there's a hierarchy of ideas, and here's how Krishna constructs it. But where you land in that exactly, who the hell am I to say? Like, in the sense of, I think that there needs to be way less condemnation of this, because again, people will look at Anadi Shankara and say, well, Advaita, isn't it? Advaita Vedanta, so clearly lower platform. Shiva, well, he dresses and behaves in a way that...
Tamasic.
Lower platform. And it's just like, I don't feel as comfortable as I perhaps have in the past, or as others feel, to just make these kind of blanket statements about these persons. I just feel like I don't have a problem talking about Advaita as an idea and saying that it is to some extent inferior, because otherwise why would I not be following it? But
yeah, but you know what it is? When people go down this route of this kind of judgment, it just stinks of insecurity. You're so insecure in your principles and your experience and your conviction that you have to just keep going on the internet, writing these comments. You have to go around pointing the finger, labeling people in this cheap way, constantly bolstering your claim over another. It's I find it unbelievably boring, if nothing else. It's just, like I said, childish. And you're so insecure. Look, I know what I've experienced with Guruji, right? I've that experience is there. And I'm going to trust that experience. And I don't really care what philosophical argument you come at me with, or even what verse you throw at me. I know what I've experienced with Guruji. What do you want me to do? Throw that aside for, what, a couple of arguments you've made? Come on.
Yeah. All right. I think we've achieved what we set out to achieve. Grounding the claim. Hopefully, as you said earlier as well, hopefully changing people's use of language and the way that they conceive of this, and at least helping them move towards a more, let's say, healthy direction of viewing the whole topic. And for those who are listening to this who are not followers of Guruji, then at least you can understand and contextualize when and why we make the claim, and if you ever encountered that claim, and that you can, as I said, hopefully remember this conversation if you ever find one that does not match the standards that we've set today. Look forward to our next episode together, Mayuran.
Me too. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.